Coaches, are you ready to revolutionize your game preparation? For the past 5 seasons, coaches across the nation have been using the ultimate scout team game changer, the Coachpad. Imagine this: no more scrambling on weekends to prep scout cards, no more fumbling with paper and binders. Whether you're drawing your cards digitally with a computer program or sketching them by hand, the Coachpad is your all in one solution. Picture yourself on the practice field effortlessly managing your scout team or standing on the sidelines during game day, syncing adjustments from the press box to your coaches on the sideline and back. With the coach pad, you can clearly see your scout cards even in the brightest sunlight. No more squinting or dealing with the wind blowing clear vinyl sleeves everywhere. This offseason, take your coaching to the next level. Get your coach pad today at thecoachpad.com and gear up for a winning season ahead.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today I have, I don't know what we've been friends, what, 4 or 5, I don't even know at this point, years. And I've already warned him I'll probably butcher his name, even though I will try not to, and we went over the phonetics of it to start. But he is the assistant head coach and linebackers coach at Ohio Northern University, Glenn Scheutzow. Good, bad, was it close enough?
That's enough where I don't think it matters. It's good. I love this. I love the strategy right there.
Yeah, see, just um, before we get started in some safety stuff and just defense and kind of how your year went. How did you end up as the assistant head coach there at Ohio Northern?
Oh, just put time in. Started off coaching at Bolden Wallace, and then spent some time there. I had a friend bridge me over to Ohio Northern. Had another friend asked me to come over to Tiffin, so I spent some time at Division II to try to, get all that figured out. Asked to come back, um, in a coordinator role at Ohio Northern, was doing that, and then we had a staff change, and someone. I was fortunate enough to be retained. But in that retainment role, wanted to kind of elevate some of those things, use my experience, use my institutional knowledge, kind of make room for some new staff members and stuff like that, and just try to place people where they can be best served. And I've really enjoyed being the assistant head coach. I really enjoyed, being able to, like we spoke earlier, investing in myself a little bit with some of that time, and just kind of becoming a better individual football coach. And I don't mind admin stuff. I feel like I'm organized, and I don't mind diving into handling some of these things, taking some other things off that coach's plate for sure. So it's been good.
Good. Like I said, and we spoke. You spoke at our state clinic last year, and then you spoke for me at Mavecca. Um, and you have had private talks too. Towards the end of your tenure as DC, and even kind of as you've researched stuff as linebacker, because you've really got into the three high safety stuff, and part of that's college too. The evolution of the college formation, passing, just college football in general is a lot different than the progress of especially Ohio high school football. What kind of drew you to the three high safety structure? Um, was it the offenses you're seeing, or was it just what kind of put you in that path before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it?
Yeah, I was always traditionally brought up started off as a 4-4-2 gap, one high guy, 4-4 defense cover three, way back when, before people even really figured out what a 4-3 defense was. So hopefully, kind of dating myself there. But, once things started to develop, and obviously, I guess as it's well known, right, defenses are always catching up to offenses, right? So as things changed offensively, the 4-3 vertical penetration, all these types of things, getting into split safety coverages, a lot of quarters type stuff became the next kind of wave. And then in there you had kind of the 3-3 stack kind of evolve itself a little bit. And that was kind of looked at in defensive worlds, like kind of the wing T was in the offensive worlds, right? It was looked at something maybe a little bit different, something, that was specialized, something that was, that people didn't really quite understand. So they just kind of stayed in their comfort zone of the 4-3. And I was a 4-3 guy as a defensive line coach, as a linebacker coach, and as a coordinator. Started off as a 4-3 guy, and then you have your sub packages and your nickel defenses and all these types of fancy terminologies, but really you're just implementing personnel to best meet the need of what the offense is making you do. Um, and then I got a phone call from a friend of mine on a random Thursday, and I was sitting in my office and we were kind of BSing about defense. And at the time he was at Iowa State, and he thought that what Coach Hickok had come up with was something he'd really never seen before, that it was really giving their offense a pain in the butt, who's the three relator, who's controlling three, and he was kind of giving me this like very brief, overview of just kind of shooting the breeze. And next thing you know, I'm kind of stopping him and asking him questions. And I'm just got my pen out and I'm on the board. And he's giving me the information like over the phone. I'm like, wait a minute. And so I'm trying to visualize the things he's talking about. And really that led into almost immediately me kind of putting in that package as kind of like a big dime package, right? Because at the time, you got your 4-3 stuff, and what do you do when it's third and long? At the time, go to dime package, you go to nickel pad, sub package, whatever you want to call it. Well, for us, a pressure package was a dime personnel, kind of a 3 down lineman. You got 6 DBs running around and you're doing that kind of stuff. Well, it's also happening at the same time that tempo was becoming really popular on offense. So I could, embarrassed to tell you probably how many times in this new world of offense and defense that it's 3rd and 12, you're in your dime package, something that's your bread and butter. The offense gets a first down, which they're prone to do every once in a while. They're going tempo, right? Now all of a sudden you're caught in dime personnel and they're going tempo and 11 personnel, and now they're kind of they're getting things. And there was just no real, at the time, major like run complement that you can really put with skill and speed on the field, in that kind of dime world. So my brain starts turning, and I actually implemented kind of this weird package. I believe at the time we called it like a money package. And it was basically like a big dime. It was a dime package with the ability to kind of support the run in a way that was, conducive at the time as far as some longer yardage stuff. And then I ended up just taking a trip out there for about the next 3 seasons, and talking with Coach Hickok. And at the time, um, I think Coach McDonald, I think, was there. Coach Veit was there. All these guys that had some Ohio ties, and obviously their ties at Toledo. I've known Coach Campbell a long time from our shared experiences at Mountain VW, and obviously his time at Toledo, and working camps together, and Bowling Green before he was a GA and all that kind of stuff. So I felt like kind of had all access, had some familiarity, and just kind of a good get along guy. And so we're hanging out and just learning, trying to get the nuances of it. And then I thought a good strategy would be, because those guys obviously have their own lives. They're busy. I mean, I know what it's like to be a Division I coach from that standpoint. Not that I've actually done it, but I've been around long enough to know that, yeah, those guys are pulled in 1,000 different directions. So I thought a good strategy would be to kind of make some connections with some of the off the field guys, maybe a QC or maybe an analyst or whatever. And then that turned into some relationship building there. Now we're going over some things privately, once a month or a couple times over the summertime. So now I'm getting even more involved with what this defense is, to the point where, I think in 2017 at Ohio Northern, we had it as a kind of a package. By the time we got to 2019, it was our base defense, and then we've just expanded on it since then. To the point where in our staff change, our head coach brought in defense coordinator with that background as well, because even he saw that it was kind of a unique style of defense, and it has its pros and cons like anything. But in my experience, there are less cons, and because you have more athletes on the field, there's also less thinking in how to protect yourself from some different cons. You know what I mean? So the pros definitely outweigh the cons for us at Ohio Northern, and it's currently still our base defense. So we're having success, running it. We've had some consistency, with however you want to define stats. You want to put stats out there, look at 2019, 2021, 2022, whatever the year, 2024, whatever the years are. We got sack leaders, we got all conference players. Our middle safety position was a 2-time All-American, led the country 2 years in a row in tackles, or in the top 5, led our conference 2 years in a row. Also his passing defense stats were really good. So it's not just like one of these, oh, he's just a safety, but he plays in a box all the time. So just that's kind of where I evolved to the point where people ask me this question every once in a while, or what's your favorite kind of defense? And I don't know if I have a favorite, but what I would tell them and what I believe is that if I could go back in time and tell the 1998 or the 1990 version of myself, I would tell myself to run this defense. Maybe it's not my favorite, but maybe it's what I believe in the most, or maybe it's the most fun to cook. I don't know, but I feel like the pros outweigh the cons enough to where, hey, run this. This is the defense you want to run. So I mean, if I'm going to make that own recommendation to a younger me, then I have to believe that it's probably the defense that I would prefer. And really, I got into some conversation with linebacker coaches outside of our staff, even on our own staff back in the day, and I think about it now, and man, you think about 4 down. Just call it a sub package where you got your nickel out of the box. You're not even worried about the third line. You just got a 6-man box, and you got a Mike and Will linebacker there, and you got a 4 down. You got an over front in front of them. This is my run fit. You got quarters behind it. This is my run fit. Oh, we're going to rotate a safety down to be one high. Oh, this is my new run fit. Oh, wait a minute. We're going to put an under front in front of you. But here's my 6 different run fits based on my coverage. Oh, wait, we're going to put an over front in you, but then we're going to slant the line. Oh, crap. Run fit, run fit. Oh, wait, we're going to put an under front in front of you, then we're just going to slant the tackles. Oh, here's my run fit. Hey, now we're going to rotate the other safety down. Oh, wait a minute. Now I'm a Mike backer who's been a spill player. Now I got to be a lever player. Wait a minute. What? I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I can't, I guess I don't know why it never dawned on me before how hard it is to be a linebacker in a meeting room. And if you're a multiple coverage team with a multiple front style, man, those linebackers are spinning, because their run fit changes just about every call. And we haven't even talked about pressures yet. You know what I mean? You got sim pressures, you got dropping people, you got, 6-man, you got peel defense. I mean, you got all kinds of stuff. Just base defense. If I'm a middle linebacker or a will linebacker and I'm sitting there going, I got quarters coverage with an over front. This is my gap. I got quarters coverage with an under front. Oh, this is my new gap. Oh, wait, now we got an H-back. We got 2-back football. How do my gaps change with the motion of, say, that H-back in that highway position, all those different things. Oh, wait, now we're going to try to rotate safeties down and play like a one-high middle field close because we don't want, if you don't know what you're doing, you're wasting a lot of time and money. It's expensive to coach that style. And that was also part of what led me to kind of enjoying this defense was all of that's darn near eliminated. You know what I mean? Which makes it really nice to kind of have that simplification so you can just play fast.
Well, I want to talk about that because, like, again, I put out surveys every year where I look at adding clinics or podcasts. Like, is there anything people want to listen to? And one of the things that came up, and that's part of the reason why I thought about you, and we talked otherwise about you possibly doing this anyways, was linebacker. I want to get the coverages and our stuff later, but like linebacker play in this, and you kind of mentioned how complex some other things are in there. What is really, and again, I know there's different styles of the three safety stuff. Like, obviously, Iowa State has their bread and butter version that's been broken down. Jim Knowles is doing his own funky thing right now with it and having a lot of success, especially now that he's got his personnel. And I've had Jim on the channel, and Jim's vastly smarter than I ever will be. But like, from a linebacker play perspective, what has actually changed for you compared to a 4-2-5, a 4-3, 4-4, whatever you want? Like, because again, your career has kind of progressed like mine has. When I
Yeah.
started, I was a 4-4, 4-3 guy, and now I'm then a 4-2-5 guy, then a 3-3 stack guy. Again, obviously you mentioned there the fits and stuff like that, but like overall technique wise, what has changed, and has it simplified drills as well for you? Like, what avenue is
Well,
that?
yeah, I think from a linebacker world specifically, you still have some coverage things that you have to focus on, right? Because the linebacker is the hardest position to play. You have your reaction time is sped up because you're close to the ball. But once you understand how to play linebacker and what you don't have to worry about, I think it can get simplified. See, a lot of people like to teach a position based on what the position has to do. And then it can be overwhelming because, again, going back to some of these four down fronts, right? I'm a B gap defender in these three calls. But then in these three calls, if we make this rotation, I'm now an A gap defender. But now I got to know that I'm a B gap defender, but there's a tackle in front of me. Well, I know he's slanting, so that I'm still a B gap defender, right? So there's a lot of things that you have to worry about that I kind of have gone in some situations to where I've coached the players what you don't have to worry about. And then by default, they stop thinking about it. And what they do have to worry about comes more natural. They're playing faster because they're not learning it from the overwhelming, like I didn't make them drink from a fire hose. You know what I mean? So I think I've stumbled upon that where, and in our level of football, like we're very competitive and we're very, we're staffed well. And, this isn't an intramural thing at all. We feel like we're very competitive. We play high caliber teams, national recognition, all that kind of stuff. We have good players, smart players, but we're limited in time. We don't have all the things that money can buy. We don't have the technology. We don't have our kids are coming to school to pursue their dreams and things that are outside of the world of football when they graduate. And I've been on campuses. I've spent time at Ohio State and Alabama, and I have friends, and I've watched, and those kids are there to play football and get a degree. But they're also on scholarship and maybe nowadays making $1 million or $2 while they're doing it. So, there are some differences when you look at what your kids can handle, what they can consume. But yet at the same time, a 4-3 at Georgia is the same as Ohio Northern. Still 4-3 defense. Now, what you can do based on your time and based on what you expect and the athletic ability. I mean, I remember going back and breaking down Notre Dame tape like in 2001, and they had some pressure where their will linebacker was their deep half safety. And I said, okay, no, can't do that here. So I mean, there's all these, kind of different variations, but because of the linebacker position is so unique, I don't think it really affects the individual part. You got to do your individual drills, you got to do your everyday drills, you got to kind of keep them fresh and kind of keep them rotated. And I got about probably an 11 or 15 kind of drill rotation that we do that helps specifically within our defense, kind of the three high safety stuff. And then the other side, from the run standpoint, I think it parallels well with that previous comment of it just eliminates a lot of things they have to worry about, right? Because if you change your front a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. Their gap won't change. And in a lot of ways, we're not asking our guys to defeat blocks, right? I'm a 3 technique and a 4 down. Man, I get reached by that guard. I got to defeat that reach. I spend all my time defeating that reach. And sometimes I do, but I'm too far with my width and I create a lane and, create space, all that kind of stuff. Or, in this defense, it's in its principal defense of the way that I think I've come to know it and have run it and found success running it. And some of the decisions that we fall into, it helps because you're not asking your kids to win every block. You want to play that lag style defense where this kid's going to reach you. Cool. Let them not literally let them reach you, but what gap you're playing. You're playing to the inside via the neck versus trying to maintain leverage to the outside via the neck. So specific linebacker play, it has simplified some run keys visually. It has simplified some variations of what their coverage responsibilities are because with the extra people on the field, your Mike backer is not your 3 relator anymore. That's basically falls the responsibility of one of your safeties. So if you can imagine playing a 4-3 defense or a 4-2-5 defense where your Mike linebacker doesn't ever have to worry about relating to 3, man, your 3-by-1 checks just got a whole hell of a lot easier. And you become more sound and safe in protecting cross-country routes and over routes and benders and all these things that, people try to high-low. RPO, Mike backers, that kind of gets eliminated because Mike Backer's not worried about a 3-by-1 alignment where he's got to line up in a 50 technique, outside leg of the DN and hedge the box to show that he's still B gap available and then hedge back out to make sure he's not being read in a Mike Reed RPO, like all these things. So from a linebacker's perspective, I think it allows him to be more of an old school kind of heavy hitter thumper. Um, and when you eliminate some of their coverage responsibilities, you don't need that perfect athlete, especially at the high school level, I would think, where, man, this guy would be awesome. And those guys get moved to nose guard. You know what I mean? In a lot of those systems where now you can play with a linebacker that doesn't have any coverage responsibilities or very limited coverage responsibilities because you're protected by some of the extra defensive, skill players that you're playing with. So I think, from a linebacker perspective, it has in some way simplified because, yeah, you're worried about less. We're not asking you to stress your athleticism very much. You're focused on things that are right in front of you. You're not always asked to just win and defeat blocks. And, the coverage stuff, yeah, you got to make sure you're prepared for some of that. So your individual drills don't have to necessarily be less, but they can be more focused, I think, is maybe a better way to put it.
Now, I mean, with that, like, I don't want to word this. Who would you say that, again, you say it's simplified for the backers. So obviously, just if you look at the law of physics, and this is where I get into if I go deep end, if it gets easier on them, who do you think it's made it harder on as a result?
Well, I don't think it has made it harder for anybody because you're asking people who are more capable to do that job. It would get harder, in my opinion, if you were asking people to do things that they weren't capable of. I go back to that example of the Mike linebacker running with three vertical. How many people want to see that happen in a 4-3 defense? Not very many. Now, if you have a Mike backer that can do it, yes, you can implement that. But if you're putting a skill receiver, a three fast guy in there, I don't think you want your Mike linebacker to run with three vertical, right? That's always how you cover reverse, all that kind of stuff. To me, that makes it harder because you have to have a way to defend against that. You have to put yourself in a way to be better prepared for that. So you have to do all these little dominoes, right? Well, let's get Mike linebacker to not worry about three. Let's let the backside safety worry about three. Okay. Didn't make it harder for the backside safety because he's equipped to handle three vertical. But now that puts on the corner because now you don't have any help for the corner because you're cross keying the three vertical in a split safety 4-down deal. So it does alleviate the three high safety defense, does alleviate, like I said, some things potentially for linebackers for D line. You would think that from a physics standpoint or from just a general balance standpoint, that by rule it will make it harder for someone else. I don't have that opinion because I think those people are better prepared to handle that endeavor of what the offense is trying to do, if that makes sense to you.
It does. Yeah. Like, I mean, also with that, like, has this simplified your coverages or have you been able to do more or less? Like, what in that realm have you been able to do and what path to take?
Well, I mean, I think, and here's in lies the rub, right? Here's kind of here's the 12th ingredients of the KFC deal that no one talks about. Um, I think that you're more limited a little bit with coverage because you want to fit the run. You know what I mean? So the coverage has to be the fit and the fit has to be the coverage. That dynamic always has to hold true. But I will say, if you want to move coverages around and you want to get into more, say, Tampa 2, well, Tampa 2 in any defense isn't really great for the run. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to run Tampa 2 on 1st and 10 against 12 personnel if it's, I mean, that's just kind of normal. So it does follow typical football trends. But when you start rotating safeties and getting into more middle field close and post defenders and things like that, there are some nuances that you have to get on a board and draw some things up and kind of show. But there are some nuances that now you have to maybe manipulate the front a little bit because your three-man, if the offense gives you, say, a three-man surface and you have a C-gap defender somewhere, well, that guy may now be the backside buzz player. You know what I mean? So it's not really truly sound because that doesn't necessarily compute. So coverages aren't any more difficult, but I think from a coaching standpoint, you just have to make sure you do a good job of vetting some things. I came up through a time where it was all pen, paper, VHS, like draw, 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 draw. I mean, you drew everything. Nothing was digital. I missed the time of actually cutting the tape, the 8 millimeter, all that kind of stuff, and the rolls and the spools and all that kind of stuff. I did miss that time, so I'm not ancient. But, I remember there was a time when there was no digital apparatus for, using DOS programs on blank screens and just typing information, having a dot matrix printer just print this thing out, and you're looking at tendencies or drawing pictures on sheets of paper and then cutting them into thirds, and whatever the highest stack is, that's the number one formation. You know what I mean? So pretty rudimentary stuff in comparing it to things nowadays. But yeah, I think you just have to draw some things out. And it's always easy if you want to fit everything, right? Like every pressure you run, you want to make sure all your guys know the run fits. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we're running this 6-man pressure. Here's your gaps. What happens when a guy fails to be in his gap? You get creased. You know what I mean? It just happened to the Steelers with Derrick Henry. You know what I mean? He's running a
Oh, that's also
whatever.
different. Yeah. That's a well,
Yeah. You're running a 6-man pressure and a guy's not in the right gap, and you get creased. So I think to answer your question, the coverage part is the part that you want to give yourself a thought process to make sure the run's getting fit properly. There are a couple rules that are very common. You know what I mean? Top down defense. It's best utilized, I think, if you're in a quarters family, so quarter, quarter, half, or true quarters across the board. You want to start closing middle of field and things. Yeah, you want to make that's kind of the secret sauce, right? To be more multiple. But then again, you got to be careful. If it's not broke, don't fix it. What do you need to close the middle of field for? In theory, if you have better people covering, if you're not asking a Mike to run with an over route and you're still able to double up the single receiver if he's a dude at X, you know what I mean? So you just got to be careful with kind of the thought process of what are you trying to accomplish? And I think that's where people have gone a little bit astray because in my eyes, this was kind of created by those guys at Iowa State, right? This is a melting pot of their collective intelligence, given a directive by the head coach, and this is what they've come up with. And I've been able to be riding shotgun, so to speak, outside the program and watching them evolve and then make some decisions. And then, when they lost Mike Rose and all those guys at linebacker, and they had all these young guys come in, well, they had to maybe take a step back and then kind of deconstruct because, again, what they'd evolved to was what their players allowed them to evolve to. When you take away that talent and that experience, the young guys might not have been able to handle it as well. So they kind of had to go back to some basics, get it kind of taught, let it evolve again. So I think, you can play with it however you want. You're always going to have the advantage of not really losing a matchup battle as far as on paper, right? I mean, if they got an NFL receiver at X and you have a guy who really likes math and he's 150 pounds at your corner, doesn't matter what defense you run. It's still, as we know, it's still about the people and their desire to play and their desire to develop and all that kind of stuff. But so yeah, I think the coverage part, not difficult. It follows a lot of quarters rules. I think it's built to be based in the quarters family. So like I said, quarter, quarter, half, quarters across the board. You want to start getting this in Tampa twos or, man freeze and how you play matchups. There's a lot of things that it lends itself to that can be very positive.
Okay. How do I word this? Like with that. Now, when you say quarters and Tampa, now how much does from a 4-3 again? Because I think Tampa, my mind automatically goes to the Buccaneers and Coach Kiffin, and your mind goes there immediately. And obviously the studs that they had on that team and all that jazz. And so when you apply it, it is a lot of the techniques you were to teach back then in that 4-3 Tampa system. Is a lot of those techniques the same when you're running Tampa, or is because you're essentially your Tampa Mike linebacker is already at 9 yards pre-snap? Is there some and you have your safeties kind of know you got help. Let's just say because because when you run a 4-3 Tampa, that might better be an athlete because you've got to get back there. Whereas that's a safety there and he's already 9 yards. Don't have to squeeze as much? Is a lot of the techniques the same, or are you allowed to cheat it or modify it a little bit? Do you think?
I mean, I think Tampa in a 4-3 for a corner or for a safety is the same, to be honest with you. You're going to want to squat your corners. You're going to play the sweet spot. You're going to try to, buzz your feet, hold your defender, jam funnel, all the stuff that you want to do. Your safeties are going to try to expand to play half the field and get, 1 yard inside or whatever, try to find their landmark of inside number one receiver. You're going to have your Tampa shell and you're going to have your rush and you're going to have that kind of stuff. You're going to have your seam players that are trying to maintain pace so they're not getting, burned, with playing too aggressive. They're in the seam, trying to hold the seams as long as they can. The major difference is, to your point, what you said, hitting the nail on the head. A Mike linebacker, that's hard to teach a Mike linebacker how to do that. How to take your picture. Is there a three vertical? You know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. Whereas now you're talking to a safety who is a more natural defender in that coverage because he's a safety.
Yeah.
He's got now the ability to play in a base alignment that puts him over number three. So there's his three vertical, right? Where's he at? At 9 yards to 11 yards, depending on how you want to spin it. And now you're sitting there asking that guy who's more capable to do it in a way that gives him, in my mind, an advantage because his area of defense has been reduced. So you're asking a guy to do less work who's more capable. If it's a 4-3 Mike linebacker, you're asking a guy who's less capable to do a whole hell of a lot more work. So, I think the techniques have really maintained themselves to be the same. And then the beauty of it is like, now what can I do? I'm not forced to worry about a Mike linebacker as a middle runner. Now I got a safety who's already at 9 to 11 yards. Now this is where the chemistry set comes out. How can I hide this? What can I make this guy do? For eons, people have been running this coverage with a Mike linebacker as your middle runner. Well, they've been forced to do things because of those limitations. So now you're sitting there going, okay, now I got a safety who's got basically a head start. The favor is his on the snap of the football. So where can he launch from? Can I get him in the box? Can I work him over this? Can I disguise the coverage and make it look like single high? And they think the flats are open. Like whatever you want to do, but now you have that capability where I think as before, you were forced to try to figure out how we're going to, or you have to say, we can't run Tampa. We don't have a Mike linebacker that can do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you're back to being limited.
Yeah. I mean, I want to ask this next step, like when you're looking at backers and safeties first, how are you fitting personnel? What do you, I mean, like if a high school coach wants to look at adding this as a either package or if you play like in the OCC in Columbus where it's D1 schools spread galore, like you're not seeing much wing T, all that jazz. What are you personnel looking for at the backer and the safety spots?
Well, I think the corners are going to be the corners, right? You're trying to find your best corner. And I think your two safeties are your normal traditional two say, like, hey, who are my best safeties? Like they're just safeties, like it's not hard. They're just playing safety, right? Your backers, your Mike and Will, let's say your Mac and Bud, whatever they call them, your interior guys. Those are nice because now you can actually have more guys available to you because their roles have been reduced to be more meat eaters. Like where is the football and who can I destroy to get to it? So you don't have to worry about, man, we would love Johnny at the Mike or the Will, but guy can't, cover, where there's a liability. Well, because his role is reduced now and he can be protected in coverage by skilled players, man, you might have a guy that can tear it open and now you can actually put him in the game and have him be your starting Will. Take that one step further with the Mike. Most Mike linebackers in this defense have zero coverage responsibilities. Zero. Think of them as an extra defensive lineman. You know what I mean? But your middle safety, I would recommend that he come from your safety room. He's going to do safety things. And you're looking for your most athletic or most instinctive safety. And then you put those pieces together and your walkout linebacker, your adjuster, your passing strength, your nickel Sam type guy. We've done it both ways where we've had one guy that can do everything. We've had one guy that we would put in there that's more of a true nickel. And then we've had a couple years where that guy was maybe more of a true Sam. But again, that is really not overly relevant to your success because he's doing the same things he would do if you run a 4-3. You know what I mean? You can still have a sub package in this defense, three safety defense. You can still have a regular package in this defense, just the same way that you'd have a 2-5 or a 4-3. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get you. Like I said, that's all. Again, personnel is always the interesting fact. How much again? Because again, I've had a lot of talk because one of my good friends is John Puckett, who's the defense coordinator at Centerville, and he's gotten a lot. He's always big into blitzing, understanding how people teach blitzing and blitz pass, and it's also always been an interesting curiosity of mine. Does this how does this affect your blitz schemes and what you're doing there? Does it affect how you teach them in terms of blitz paths and angles? Does it allow you to be more creative, less creative, and so forth?
I found through trial and error that from a blitz path standpoint, not much changes. You can be as exotic as you want. Um, I think from a quarterback identification standpoint, you can do some things that can kind of make his job harder. You only have a three-man front, right? You have a Mike backer who doesn't have coverage responsibilities and any coverage that you can employ. Otherwise, you're dropping 8, right? So, um, you know, you could send the Mike linebacker on a predetermined blitz path that looks a little bit weird and have that be a package part of your sim pressure package because you're only blitzing 4. You can blitz a corner and make it look like some sort of corner fire, some sort of cat fire, but if you don't send anyone else, you know what I mean? Now you're again, so you have replacement guys standing all over the place to me, your simulated pressure package has become a lot more kind of expanded, which can make the quarterback, oh crap, this guy's coming from an angle that we don't necessarily have the great matchup on. So, maybe it speeds up the clock, maybe it speeds up the anticipation. Because you have more skill on the field based on who you have in those positions. I tell the linebackers all the time, like we're in week 2 of the season, and I tell them, whatever you bench, you bench. If you bench 315, you're benching 315 for the rest of the season. If you run a 4.7, you're running a 4.7 for the rest of the season. Like you're not getting any faster. Like you should have done this stuff over the summertime. But when you show up to camp, that's who you are. If you're a 4.7 guy or a 5 flat guy, that's who you are.
Yeah.
So I tell them all the time, I said, how can you change your rate of speed without the physical aspect of getting faster? You know what I mean? And the two answers that I believe in are alignment and anticipation. If you are better geared in your head and you're better prepared mentally from watching film, you might play like you run a 4.5 because you're anticipating, you're getting there faster. You're still running a 4.7 or a 5 flat. You're still running a 5 flat out there, but you're getting there as fast as a 4.5 guy would because of your anticipation. Or, hey, if I want to get to point A or B, if I want to run 10 yards as fast as I can, well, if I'm at 10 yards, I'm going to run 5 flat. If I'm at 5 yards and only have to run 5 more yards, I'm still going to run it at 5 flat, but the clock's going to show that I got there in half the time. So those two things we focus on teaching those guys how they can get faster without changing their rate of speed. You know what I mean? Because that's how fast they're going to be. A 5 flat guy that shows up in August is going to be a 5 flat guy until next August if he doesn't work on it. So how in week 3 can you make him be a 4.5 guy? It's not through the weight room anymore. That's past. That's for the offseason. Right now, it's through anticipation and launch point. So when you have some movement, you have some skill. It's hard to move a 3 technique, right? He's limited to where he can move. But you can move a Mike linebacker stem them around. You can move all, you can bring your middle safety down to a 5 yard depth. You know what I'm saying? You can bring a nickel Sam guy in to be, 2 by 1 off the line of scrimmage and, still be able to play a hold a two seam or replace him with the Mike and bring him off the edge. So you can put more pressure, in my opinion, on a quarterback, on an offense, because you can change your launch points and you can have those guys anticipate well to where um, you can do what you need to do. You know what I mean? And you can have those opportunities to really mess with an offense without having to worry about, all the physical attributes that you always um wish that you had. I wish this guy ran or we can't do that because this guy is not fast enough. Where if you change launch points or get his anticipation better, yeah, then he's going to play as fast as you need him to at that point.
Now, also with that, when you're met again, I'm trying to stay on the three safety topic. Um, how much are you playing with fronts with it as well? Like, because again, there's like obviously if you look at the original, because you talked about the Iowa State, the Heacock stuff, and there were very much obviously the tight front, and then they slid into certain things with the 4-1. Like again, they would as they've evolved a little bit with it as well. And then you look at other teams like, I mean, I know Knowles and who else was it? Nebraska, Wisconsin also do a lot more of like a true 4-1 box,
Yeah.
like four front, three safety stuff. Like, how much are you playing with fronts? I mean, I know this little answer a little bit because again, I sat in and watched your thing last year and how that went.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but for people who weren't there, how, like how, and again, it's also been a year. How are you approaching fronts and fits versus various looks?
Well, I think the nice thing there that I think has been evolved is you don't want to get too fancy with that because you don't want to destroy kind of the core of what you think your advantage is. You know what I mean? And to be a little more detailed there is, you start getting into a 303 or a 305 or a 4I0, 4I, and all these different things, you can kind of outthink yourself and you can actually make it harder for you to operate because again, you're dealing with basically a 5-man box at this point, right? So you want to have some advantages of how you teach your reads and how you teach your defensive ends and stuff like that versus gap scheme versus zone, those types of things. So you kind of can differentiate between the two and the kids understand. I think the beauty lies where you can teach the defensive end, the Mike, the zero, the will, and the backside defensive end. You can teach them all the same techniques. So if you're going to gap exchange, they don't have to learn anything new. You know what I mean? This guy does this, you do that. Well, that's the same thing the defensive end would do. That's the same read the defensive end has. You know what I mean? Of how you're trying to fit those interior gaps. So, I think that um, if you're going to sort of play with fronts, you just got to be careful because it can accidentally give the offense the advantage in which you're trying to protect yourself against, right? So you want to have definitely that definitely has to work in sync, right? Those two backers are really kind of defensive linemen in that world, in the run fit world. But the nice thing is you're teaching the run fits basically the same as far as the keys and the reads. Now there's a difference between how a 5 technique takes on a base block versus, if you want to put your Mike, the Mike's running downhill, like, there's technically some different things. Is he shedding? Is he stunning? Well, how's he using his hands? But if you want to get into it, you can, and you want to simplify it without doing any harm to the defense, you can teach all those guys the same terminologies and they'd be fine running that defense, which then allows you to situationally change your front. I wouldn't change fronts arbitrarily just to kind of confuse the offense because those guys get paid money. They figure it out, right? And especially if they see it a few times, like, oh, he's going there. Oh, hey, watch the slant. Like they figure it out. Like that's football. We all know that. But if you can use your fronts strategically based on situational football or based on game plan, I think that's where you can really gain an advantage. You know what I mean? Not so much doing it just because you can. And now let's line up in a, 305 or a 035 and, really walk these backers. You can just get caught kind of, you know, in the wrong situation and get gashed. You know what I mean? But The safest and most structural is just to play the 505. That's the kind of the best way to keep things simple and sound. And then if you make changes and tweaks, you just got to make sure that you understand what those dominoes are. And it's not hard. It's not much investment. It's cheap, right? I'm always looking for cheap things in the world of football. I don't want expensive. I don't have an unlimited amount of cash. You know what I mean? I'm on a tight budget when it comes to dealing with these players. So, if it's simple and it's cheap and I can, I don't have to invest a lot of in football world, your currency is time, right? So, if I can spend, as little as that as I can, then I'm onto the right thing because again, I want it to be efficient. I want it to be taught in that linebacker meeting room in that 60 minutes we have. I don't want it to be something that I got to go over and make corrections on and come back 3 days later and still get it right before the game on Saturday. To me, that's just too expensive. I don't have that kind of cash. And again, I allude to that metaphor of in my world, the currency is time. You know what I mean? So it's try to stay as frugal as I can when it comes to what I'm trying to teach and how fast I can get the kids to kind of get it so they can execute it.
The last question I got for you is from kind of a learning and time perspective. What from when you started messing with it, when you met with the Iowa State coaches and talking to your buddy, to even up to this year, obviously with you taking a step back and them bringing in somebody with the experience and you allowing you time to view things, how like in looking over it, like what I don't know, want to say necessarily say like what do you wish you knew, but like what have you learned, or like what little things should people who mess with the three safety or that's their becomes their baby or whatever, how should they any tidbits or anything if you get what I mean.
Oh yeah, I mean I see what you're saying. I think for me one of the lessons learned was the old Jim Tressel when it came to the alcohol, right? Drink the first, sip the second, refuse the third. I think you apply that rule to the three safety defense, right? Drink it all in at first. But then if you keep doing it, you're going to find yourself getting gashed and causing problems for yourself that you can't fix because you just fell for it. You know what I mean? And now you're trying too much and you got X's and O's on the board. We can bring this safety in, we can slide this guy over here, and it all looks really good. But again, football is still structure. And if they have, a gap that is open and you can't fill it, that's probably where the ball's going to end up more times than not. So I would say that from my vantage point is, if you can find someone that can give you some of those, secret ingredients, so to speak, to kind of the glue that holds it all together, and you can learn it in that way, then stick to that as long as humanly possible. Don't fall for that kind of fool's gold of, oh, look what I can do. Because there is that going from a 4-3 penetrate style or one gap or, multiple coverages, all these things that a 4-3 can do for you. When you go into this world, it's like it's a different set of toys. And you're like, oh man, we can convert that. Oh man, we can run this. And this guy's really, I would just try. That's what I learned probably was just really stay to the structure and the core and build off of that as opposed to getting ahead of yourself and just really having fun with all the different variations of things that you can now do because there seems to be so many things that have opened up for you because you're dealing with more skill. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that makes sense, I guess. You know what I mean from a standpoint.
No, 100% makes sense. And that's, I mean, but again, that's always like, again, how do you cheat the learning and asking somebody, okay, what do they know, how they know it, all that jazz instead of all that. And like, again, there's a lot, again, any defense, there's a lot into it. It's knowing the tidbits and the other things. And um, again, just kind of to give somebody a general background, but again, like I said, just, okay, what can you do out of it? Like, again, I see the structure, and I mean, you talk about Tampa quarters, and just because I'm a diehard cover three guy, like, oh, I can easily just do
Right.
X, Y, Z. But again, there are holes and there are problems, as you point out, and again, I get why people want to play Tampa. Like, I mean, it makes sense. Like, but
Well,
again,
because that
outside
was the
of
same question. Interesting enough, some of those connections is one of those people that I was talking with at Iowa State. Again, I'm a big believer of where do things start? Who's involved? I don't like to get things fourth handed and fifth handed and stuff like that, right? because everyone's got their own personal spin on it. And so I asked those questions about same question you asked. After 3 years of this, what have you learned? You know what I mean? What are you doing different, right? What are some things that and then this boom happened with there was like a 2 year window where it seemed like every third team you talked about, someone was doing a variation of this three high safety stuff, right?
Yep.
Whether it was Baylor, whether it was Northern Iowa, whether it was, whether it was the current head coach at Oklahoma. One of the years I was out there, um, Venables was out there when he was a DC at Clemson. And sure enough, when I'm breaking their film down, they're down package. They're in three high defense. You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, I know where he got that from, so people have their different variations, different versions. And sometimes if you just leave it, you start to convert what you just learned to what you have already known. And that's where this can get, just like any defense. That's where it can get. Like when we went from the 4-4 to the 4-3, we were trying to do all this cool new stuff with these outside linebackers that can do all these things because we're playing one gap. We've got two safeties back there. Holy crap. Well, we were applying certain things that we knew that didn't translate from a 4-4 to a 4-3. So there is that evolution phase that you as a coach have to go through when you try something new. You almost have to kind of dump some of the structure of what you previously have known, and so going to my point, I asked them, you watch film, like you watch Kansas State, you watch Baylor, you watch all these teams that, hell, you're lining up against doing the Spider-Man meme. You know what I mean? Like you're lining up against Baylor, who's running your defense, like, and their answer was pretty blunt. They were like, well, sometimes we laugh. TCU, right? Was running it. Sometimes they laugh because they see what they're trying to do, but they're not quite in it yet. So there's holes, because they're trying to, kind of fit square peg in a round hole type situation. But then they were also very complimentary of some teams. Hey, this team is really most like us. We've actually learned a couple things from this team, how they've decided to play this or how they decided to use that person. You know what I mean? But you know how it is. Football is about details. It's about what's your alignment, where are your leverage, what's your field markings, and all those things come into play, and all those things can be adjusted. And some of those things, your area of defense can be reduced when you have more skill, and I think that's what this defense has really opened my eyes to. Um, but again, directly to your question, um, not to be redundant, but I think that's probably what I've learned is really stay the course in the structure and the foundation of the defense. Don't just become drunk with, oh, look at all this cool stuff. You know what I mean? Because and I learned those lessons, oh, let's multiply the fronts, four eye this, and we got gashed and we lost a game or two because I wasn't as prepared as I wanted to be or needed to be. I was, didn't vet something well enough, and oh crap, they do get that pulling guy around in gap scheme, and the four eye really kind of had deflated our defense in that regard because we were no longer had the numbers advantage or we no longer were able to keep a leverage advantage. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So, so you learn things along the way, but broad stroke, right? 35,000 foot view is you implement this, learn the structure, get to know the alignment, the leverage, all those types of things. So you have a sound base and don't become again drunk with, oh wow, look at all this defensive skill. We can run this, we can play 2x2 this way, man. We got this guy who can cover three vertical, man. We can now do that. You just got to be careful with that. You know what I mean? Yeah, all these cool things, and you're like, oh wow, this will help us out a ton. Because what you're doing is you're compensating for things that you struggled with that you no longer have struggled with because you have a better personnel matchup. You know what I mean? And sometimes that can lend itself to, just maybe trying some things before you're ready to try them. And I fell victim to that. You know what I mean? So I probably would have slowed things down a little bit and got away from some of the exotic pressures and just trying too much because you had all these cool things you could do. So, that's probably that's what I pulled from my, years of experience with this defense and then asking those same questions to what I consider the kind of creators of this style of defense. You know what I mean?
No, I get you. No, I get you 100%. Like, and again, that's just the background because that's, again, after me and you talked last year before I stepped down to be closer to family, that's with health issues and everything. And that was one of the things I was really looking heavily at Bradford was, okay, I had a couple good DBs. We were not a lot of like true D linemen or linebackers, and put more speed on the field. And that's something I studied a lot because again, me and you talked a lot and talked to Runda who did it big at Bluffton and
Oh, yeah.
um again, so like, and then obviously I know Jim a little bit, and Puckett, who's a good friend of mine, talked to Jim a lot as well. And so, but yeah. So, all right. Well, everybody, give Coach a follow. His stuff will be in the bio. Like, share, subscribe, all that lovely crap. It does help people find the videos. Check out our sponsor, Coachpad. I'm probably forgetting something, but oh well. Um, you can see how enthusiastic I do when I do my exit spiel. Otherwise, that's another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.